In order to know where you want to be, you have to understand where you are now. And I recall sitting down and looking at a figure of $2,000. Well, now what? The big thing is it is going to take change, and change can be scary, but it could also be incredibly rewarding.
Hi guys, welcome to today's episode. We've got Philip Swin, great property investor, someone I think a lot of us can learn from. He's got a wealth of experience when it comes to all things investing, and also property investing, whereas he's a very close friend to Duratax. So today we have Phil. Thank you, Phil, for coming on.
Tuan, thank you for having me on board. And Tuan, I think you speak too highly of me. I think I just consider myself a regular property investor. I'm a dad, 40 years old. I got into it really, really late. And hopefully I've got some things that I can share today that makes things a little bit easier for some of the listeners out there.
Awesome. So already I'm learning something from that already, that it's never too late to start, right, Phil?
Never too late.
And it's okay. What we're looking for is everyday property investors, right? Plenty of podcasts out there that talk about people that have made it to 50, 100 properties. And that's a great achievement in itself. But I think people start to forget the layers, that if you peel them back, that the hardest part of it all is starting with anything that we do, right? And you've got to be able to crawl before you can walk. And so that's what we really want to learn in these episodes, is that we're looking for people that have started. I mean, by no means are you average. Certainly, we're looking at your portfolio. You've got a couple of properties under your belt, but just seeing that you were able to do that in a very recent amount of time, especially as it is 2024, property has been very tricky to get into. If you've been investing in property only in the last 5-6 years, property prices have been increasing ever since I ever started investing back in 2010. I was very fortunate to learn about it very early on, because my parents were pushing me into it. Not everybody has that privilege, and I'm almost 40 years old myself, so I'm sort of sitting in your shoes as well. And unless you've got that education or someone to push you into it, and you're starting really late. And if there was ever a time to buy property that was the trickiest ever, was probably in the last 4 to 6 years, I think.
Absolutely.
You know, and you've been right in the midst of that. And so learning on how you started it and what really triggered you, I think is going to help heaps of people out there. So thank you, and looking forward to making this one.
No dramas. No, thanks for having me on board.
So tell me about your background, Phil. Where did it all start for you? Australian born?
Yes.
You're a dad?
Yes. So I'm 40 years old. I'm a dad recently. So I've got a 5-month-old boy. His name's Kai. Very proud of him. And where did it all start? So I'll give you a little bit of history about myself. So I'm second generation Australian born from Vietnamese boat immigrant parents. And my parents, when they got here and when I was born, I would say that unlike yourself, right? You mentioned that your parents sort of instilled a value of investing in property from a young age. Now, my parents probably didn't have the fluency to teach a young boy about financial literacy, right? And so from a very, very young age, I remember my parents saying to me, son, you need to save money. I didn't really know what that meant. I didn't know to what end. I didn't know the means of doing so. You can imagine a young child being told to save money. I'm like, hang on a minute, I can go out and I can buy candy with this money. Why would I want to save it when I can have some candy now? I wasn't really taught in a way that I was knitted into my fabric that I knew that, look, if I could save money now, instead of having one candy today, I could have 10 candies in the future, right?
Yeah, that delayed gratification of saving, and what does it actually do?
Absolutely, Tuan. So I think for me, growing up, second generation Australian, I was picking up amongst all of my peers that life was fleeting, that finance was fleeting, that once you had $1 in your pocket, the quicker you spent it, the more joy that you had. And so I probably lived the first 30, almost 35 years of my life like that, Tuan.
And I can completely understand, because I think financial literacy is not something, migrant parents of yours and mine would ever think about, because it's very much the mindset of, we came here with nothing, we started with nothing, and so everything that we have is a sense of gratitude about it.
Yes.
And hence spending it is a sense of, pride and privilege to do so.
I remember getting into so much trouble because Dad would put a $2 coin in my Dolomite account, and one time I just came up with this genius idea. instead of watching that money disappear, let's just pilfer it out of that little bag and let's go buy 10 Devon Faces from the school canteen and give them away to my friends. I'd be like the most popular guy on the block. Man, the scolding I got from my dad when he found out that
there was no savings.
There was no savings. He's like,
so you already had bad habits from the get-go. Like,
100%, man. Like, talk about, like, from the age of 6, it was like, okay, yeah, this kid has no idea what money is all about.
And that's pretty common, as we can probably sum up. That's probably a lot of migrant families. Yeah, there were some migrants that are extremely wealthy today with, being able to buy commercial properties and, and houses. But the financial literacy for those people was instilled, like, probably when they first arrived here.
Yes.
It wasn't until 2010, my parents anyway, was like, hey, you should really buy a property. I'm pretty sure it wasn't my mum and dad's idea. It was probably like them brushing off on cousins and sisters and brothers that they had.
Yeah.
They were buying property for their kids or helping them with the parental guarantors or helping them with a bit of a deposit.
Yeah.
So, hey, you got to get in it because it's affordable. Interest rates started to get a little bit cheaper in the early 2000s.
Yep.
And that's when people started. And so, but not for everybody, would understand that.
100%.
And that's quite a unique place to be. But of course, others learn much later, right? Until you realize that, hey, I'm now in my late 20s. I need to do something about it.
It's almost like, it almost feels like a pseudoscience. I remember having conversations with people where it's the rich that get richer and it's in their DNA. They knew how to do this. They knew how to make money or earn money or pull money out, or they had luck, right? And I remember being very dissatisfied with that sort of explanation, thinking, hang on, so it's only a select few that can be rich?
It's not built for me, or it's not built for you, or it's not built for us.
I don't have the wealth
them.
gene. That's them. Yeah. That's right. Our wealth is not for me.
Yeah.
Like I recall thinking that's a different class of person, and I don't belong into that class.
Yeah, I agree with you, and it can almost feel impossible. And then, of course, if we put ourselves, take yourself 10 years back, Phil, and you think, man, when I didn't have any properties, myself 12 years ago I didn't have any properties, it felt difficult. Who would even think about this?
Yes.
And to even have that, and then now looking back, I think, man, I think there's a lot of privilege in even being able to take that first step, and hopefully we can unravel that with you today. And so how did it evolve for you? How old were you when you first thought, you know what, it's time to get serious?
Yeah, it's a good question, Tuan, because I recall my parents instilling the value of owning your own home, right? From quite a young age. And they said, it's going to be hard for you, and this is the reason why you save money. Once again, my primitive young mind couldn't really put together, how does saving money, how does squirreling away money, why would I want to own a property? For me, it was never a wealth mindset. It was more of a charge from my parents or an instruction from my parents, this is what you need to do. So if anything, it was just a mission, right?
Yes, yeah.
It was a job that I needed to fulfill. It was boring, right? There was nothing sexy about it.
You're not doing
there was
it for yourself.
Absolutely. There was nothing fun about it. There was nothing that excited me about it. And I suppose where the penny started to drop was perhaps it was in my sort of adult years. I was in my late 20s, early 30s when I met some wealthy individuals, right? Just through some community groups that I was involved in. And a few of them had the heart to sort of reach out to young adults who just sort of didn't have their finances together, just to go, hey guys, we want to teach you, or I want to teach you about financial freedom, right? Did you know that I don't actually actively have to work these days? And I'm like, oh my gosh, what, people can actually do that? And once again, the picture was, that's you, that's your story, I'm very happy for you. I have no idea how that story translates to me. It almost seemed, again, almost like a pseudoscience, like a black magic. Like you draw a lot from the day that you're born, and if that lot meant that you were going to be poor for the rest of your life, that's it. You're locked in by fate, right?
Yeah.
But then I had some really generous individuals who spent time to talk to me about investing, right? They had a chat to me about the real basic 101s of financial literacy, And I recall one of them giving me a challenge to say, Phil, in order to know where you want to be, you have to understand where you are now, right? And let's sit down and do an exercise. And the exercise, I didn't know it at the time. It was a net wealth exercise. It's basically to draw a picture of going, and the way that it works, it's pretty basic. You sit in front of an Excel and you go, okay, these are all of the assets that I own. The shirt on my back, the car that I drive, my bed, my furniture, everything that I own, you draw that up in one column. The column next to it, you draw all of your liabilities, all of your debts, or anything that your credit cards that you're owing, all of that. And A minus B Where are you on C, right? And
It's very confronting, isn't it, once you put that into paper?
absolutely.
Yeah.
Like, you're removing all of the emotion, all of the BS, right? There's quite literally looking at a number going, this is what my life's value is at. This is what I'm worth. And I recall sitting down and looking at a figure of $2,000. So I was 33 years old when I did that exercise, and I'd been working from the age of 17 or whatnot. And so for all of that time that I'd been working, how much could I cash it all in for? $2,000. That was a confronting figure.
I bet. Yeah.
So that's how it all started. I think I remember looking at that and going, I don't really have all that much to show for this life, and there are a lot of people out there doing a lot better than I was.
So how did you respond to it? Like, was it something you took on negatively, or did you take it on a positive light pretty quickly to turn it around?
This is the thing, right? It's a double-edged sword, Twan, right? And I don't know if I'm a bit of an outlier this way. I don't know if anyone relates to me, but I recall feeling it was confronting. I felt quite depressed about it. It wasn't inspiring at all. And what I needed to do was actually lean a little bit on the community who had actually sat me through that exercise and say, well, okay, now what, right? And then you get proposed a pretty tough question, and that is, well, are you happy there, right? Are you happy being worth $2,000?
What are you going to do about it?
What are you going to do about it? And if there was a way to change your life, would you be open to that, right? And even further, what would you like that value to sit at? Where would you go, oh, this is what I'm worth, right? That was a really confronting question, because I think being a second generation Australian born, feeling the secondhand pressures of my parents saying, we've come to this brand new country, we've started all over again, our hopes are on you, son, to go off and build a legacy.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, I'm just a
family tree, eh?
I'm just a regular dude.
With $2,000.
With $2,000. What, like, you know, I feel like I'm letting you down. Yeah.
And so where do you go, Phil? So you obviously got the financial advice. Look, guys, and essentially the summary of that is that, yes, you do have to be careful who you talk to, especially when it comes to property advisory, property consultants.
Yes.
But regardless of what it is, the essence of all property advisors is, or any financial advisor, is that they do have financial literacy.
Yes.
Something that a lot of our parents potentially don't have.
Yes.
Right? Especially a migrant parent.
Yes.
That doesn't really know or hasn't been educated well in this space.
Yep.
My parents are very much that way, in that they struggled to pay off their house. It was always spending, save for their kids, give their kids a good life, and that has its ramifications.
Yes.
In that, you know, your personal finances take a back seat.
Yep.
But once you talk to these financial advisors and people that are financially literate, they have that in common, and they're able to give you that intel and that information to say, this is what you're doing wrong, and this is where you need to go. Maybe that's where the buck stops. And when it comes to the advice part, like where to buy and which property to buy and whatnot, what type of asset suits you, you've got to do your homework. That's where it's important,
100%.
because we'll go into the first property, right, Phil?
Let's go into it.
Yeah, because that's I'm just looking at the portfolio. Is that was great because the learning curve to get there was powerful.
Yes.
But there was more further learnings from buying the first one. So tell me more about that.
Twan, you're always learning, right? Always learning. And I'll sit here hand on heart say that the first property I bought, that was the worst property I could have bought, right? I had made an emotional decision, remembering that my parents' charge on me was like, well, go and buy yourself a property, right? Just go get in there and do. Again, my parents weren't property investors. And so the first property I bought was a one-bedroom apartment in Hurstville, and it was an off-the-plan apartment, right? And the succumbing to sort of life's pressures to just get into the market, I made a hasty decision to do that. I had caught up with a very suave property sales agent who was selling these off-the-plan properties, and they painted a really nice picture of this beautiful apartment that I could live in, live my bachelor's life. Everything was shiny and brand spanking new. And I mean, I got caught up in it. I'll admit that. And it wasn't the best property, Twan. It wasn't the best property. The funny thing is, even being the worst property I could have bought, it still is performing. It is heads and shoulders above doing nothing. Heads and shoulders. And I'm telling you, I would not make that decision again. I would not recommend that decision for anybody.
Yeah, like it was, you purchased that property for what?
So $585,000 is what I purchased it for.
Yeah.
To sign the contract to get into the property was only $10,000. It was very, very attractive. Being someone who was cash poor at the time, 10 grand wasn't a big entry or barrier of entry into market. So you take advantage of the first homeowners grant. It was only a $10,000 barrier to entry.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, so there was some grant available. I think there was an additional 25 grand or something to subsidise for first timers.
Yes.
Especially brand new. I think it was a brand new.
It was brand
thing.
new. Yeah. So like it had the makings of getting someone into the market quickly.
So brand new apartment's very appealing.
Yes.
Yeah,
it's
because
very, very appealing at the time. So I signed up really quickly. I think I remember signing up on the first meeting with the property agent.
He was loving it.
Yeah, and they were seeing dollars and they love it. And it's good. They were really good at their job.
Yeah.
Right? And so that they got me on board with the Hurstville property. Yeah.
So good. And then, of course, how that property today, do you know what it's worth?
Yeah, so the last time I checked, recently, it's currently sitting at $610,000.
So not a huge uplift?
Not a huge uplift. So recall, like it was 2017 I signed up for this property.
So it's been 7 years, right?
It didn't even settle until 2021.
Oh, wow,
So
4 years.
4 years of just being a piece of air. And if you recall, 2017, 18, 19, 20, there was a big lull in the property market.
It was, yeah.
And so the developer had me signed up to a contract that was watertight, right? This meant that they could spend their time deciding whether they actually wanted to go ahead with the development and build or not, right?
Right. Yeah.
So they had all the power in their hands to decide, do we want to go ahead or do we want to on-sell to someone else or do we just give everyone their money back?
Because they've got that sunset clause in place.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so I was locked in. In the years between 2017 to 2021, my life circumstances had changed. You know, I met my partner who is now my wife, and there were plenty of things that we wanted to do together that we could have done together, but because I knew I was stuck in this property, I couldn't. I was locked in.
Yeah, hands were tied.
My hands were tied, absolutely. And so I even compare that decision, and this is just a quick illustration, instead of going for that 1-bedroom apartment for the same price, I could have bought like a 3-bedroom house in Cabramatta for the same price, which if you look at that 3-bedroom house in Cabramatta today, do you know what it's worth, Tuan? It's $1.5 million, right? So my first investment, $585, now $610, could have been $585, now $1.5 million.
So you would have been net $2 million.
Absolutely.
But the learning lesson, regardless.
The learning lesson was, so it's a, what is it? Let's call it a $1 million lesson, right?
An expensive one.
An expensive lesson.
But and nonetheless, but the first property there, I think to get there was such an achievement because you've got to break through so many mental barriers, to cross paths, you know, having the conversations with your parents and saying, hey, it's important to start building on this property journey or this property, at least a property, to have some footing in your financial stability. And that having that, then buying a property is a huge hurdle. The first property there gives you the opportunity to now look at, you know, you understood how finances work, what it takes to build. How did you go from, especially because the equity amount wasn't huge, how did you sort of push yourself to the second?
I love this question, Tuan. So what happened was I was dating my now wife, Natalie, at the time, and Natalie had some money and she wanted to buy a property, right? Remember, this was the property time where everyone was asking a lot of questions. There was a lot of activity and excitement, right? Natalie and I, we were starting to date, starting to get a little bit serious. She was saying, look, I'm looking at investing in a property. We were looking at each other at the time and it wasn't the right time for us. It was just a phase of life for us to be investing in something together or moving out together. We weren't quite there yet. But from my lessons from Hurstville and from my experience there, I was able to say to Natalie, well, if you want my advice, invest in something that's going to pay you back. Yeah. And so even for her, it was a bit of a challenge because what she wanted was to buy an apartment in Liverpool because she lived in Liverpool and she could look around and say, look, I could visit my apartment anytime I wanted. I'm familiar with the area. And so it was about deconstructing why that was important in an investment and like the net wealth exercise, boiling it back to numbers, right? And so the advice or the, I guess, the lessons that I'd learned and was learning at the time was, okay, well, which areas do we want to be investing in if we wanted to do something purely for capital growth, but also to sustain some type of cash flow, right?
Awesome. Where do people make that decision and go, oh, you know what, it's time to, have a family? And so how do you weigh that up between maybe potentially rent vesting, right? That's always an option.
Yes.
Do you consider that?
Absolutely. We started off as rent investors.
There you go.
Yeah.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Tell us more about the next journey then.
Yeah, so after securing the Aberglasslyn property and having Hurstville sort of in the background, waiting to get built, we were kind of locked into it, right? We weren't able to afford to buy our own home just yet because we would sort of had our money squirreled away. So we decided, well, let's rent, right? I mean, we were kind of forced into it. And it was great for the time that we were renting. We were renting an apartment in Parramatta. It was great for our lifestyle. It was, on top upstairs from all the nice cafes and all the Italian restaurants.
Yeah.
And there was a lot of development happening in Parramatta at the time. It was really exciting. We adopted a dog and we were having I would say that were like some of the most joyous years because it was just, it was kind of carefree. Simple. Natalie's home was kind of paying itself off.
No mortgage stress.
Yeah, no mortgage stress on that. We weren't finding that our weekly pay was getting outlaid into this property.
Yeah.
My property, we were just waiting for it to get constructed.
So you didn't have that commitment over there yet?
So there was zero commitments.
And what year was this, Phil, roughly?
This would have been 2018, 2019, through COVID as well.
Yeah.
We were rent vesting through COVID and...
So then that means that, for where you were renting at the time, it was almost like it was probably cheaper to rent than it was to buy something in 2019 by the time the uplift in property. Because it was moving, not fast, but it was moving still, wasn't it?
Yes.
In those years, and especially in the Parramatta area.
Absolutely. And if you recall, like one thing that I'm very grateful for is how COVID, bit of a freeze on rent costs. And so I think at the time, you wouldn't think of it now, but we were paying like $450 a week on rent for a 2-bedroom apartment. You couldn't get that up today. And that was locked in for like 2 years because of COVID. So very grateful for that.
Yeah.
So that really helped with the cash flow situation.
Yeah. And then when did you, Natalie, the wife, decide to, let's make that move and purchase something? What was the mindset behind that?
Yeah, so we didn't want to rent forever.
Yeah.
And the option was, okay, do we draw equity and go buy another investment property and continue to rent? Yeah. And at the time we were getting married, we were thinking about having kids, and of course the great Australian dream is to own your own home. Yeah. And so that has always been a dream of mine as well. So when I sat down from the age of 33, it was to own your own home. That was one of my goals. Yeah. And so when we talked about that, we thought, okay, well, what position are we in? Let's draw equity on Hurstville, which had been built at the time and was collecting rent. Let's draw equity on Aberglasslyn. Let's sort of, see where our positioning is at. We had a really, really helpful lender at the time. We were presented with our options. Of course, my dear wife, Natalie, wanted to sell everything and buy a massive house out in Moorebank for, over $1 million just so we could live the life. Yeah. There was parts of me that said, look, if we could play this out a little bit longer and if we can, again, squirrel away for a little bit longer, what we could do is we can retain our investment properties, live in our own home for now in a place that we may kind of spend the next 5 to 6 years in.
Yep.
And then
it doesn't have to be a forever home.
It doesn't need to be a forever home. That's right. And that's where we find ourselves today. Yeah.
And so you were looking at options to rent vest.
Yes.
But also buy your own home.
Yes.
Now, when you do that math, I guess buying your own home, you wanted to make sure that property wasn't just a property that had the lavish, brand new building and sort of sacrifice all capital growth. Because when you're buying a lavish building on a parcel of land, a lot of that cost, the acquisition cost or the purchase price is built into that building as well, isn't it?
Yes.
So it actually has a lot less land value compared to an older house on that block that might have the opportunity to develop or what did you call it? What was the word you used?
Manufactured equity.
Manufactured equity, in which case you could build a granny flat.
Yes.
So that's the sacrifice you make. If you buy something new, even on a block of land, you always sacrifice that opportunity to manufacture equity. So then how did you sort of work through that thinking, that train of thought of let's find something that's going to manufacture equity? Yeah,
so for us, it was that discussion between, we were kind of looking at an A and B option. A option is we were probably going to buy like a duplex on about 150, 200 squares.
Brand new.
Brand new, yeah. It was going to be pretty. It was going to be shiny. You know, you
Kind of like your Hurstville apartment again.
kind of like the Hurstville apartment again. Yeah, you're right. Now, as my dear wife loved the idea, she wanted something brand new. She wanted something shiny. I have to say, again, very grateful that she would sort of be talked into looking at buying an older property on a big piece of land. So again, like you're looking at a brand new property on 150, 200 squares versus what we ended up choosing, which is a 3-bedroom house on 770 squares, right? I'd always known the principle was you buy land, the bigger your piece of land, the more it was going to rise in capital. And especially if you had the opportunity to build a granny flat, manufacture equity, they were options that were open to us. And even the agent that we consulted with at the time that sold us the property, he had told us that previous owner, the current owner at the time, she'd already subject to approval to DA the building of a granny flat, which was sort of currently in process. And so for me, it was ticking the boxes. Out of all the lessons that we had learnt from Hurstville and knowing that, you know, you wanted something like Aberglassland, that if you were to purchase your own home, and if that could be also like to be a goose that would continue to lay golden eggs for you, why not, right? And like, I mean, understanding how granny flats work as well, that's a brand new building. Everything is depreciable. Every dollar spent into a granny flat is depreciable dollar.
Yeah, so, awesome. Thanks for the plug.
Return, yeah.
Thanks for the plug, Phil. Appreciate that. But Phil, and what year was that, Phil, that all this was, the owner-occ was happening, owner-occupied property?
The owner-occ happened after COVID. This is recent times. This is 2022. This happened, yeah.
And it's performed well for you?
Yes.
Even without, have you got the granny flat on it now?
Haven't touched it.
Okay, so how's it performed even without the granny flat? Do you know?
Yeah, it's done very well, well. We didn't expect it to do as well as it had. We purchased it for $815,000, which I believe at the time was slightly above the market rate.
Yeah, but it had a lot going for it in terms of land size, the opportunity to develop the property into a house and granny flat.
Yep.
So it was worth a while.
It had the numbers stacked up to it, and so we didn't mind paying a little bit extra. And I'm proud to say that today it stands at about 930 to 50 at the moment.
Bad.
So that's like at the last, that's how much it's in 2 years.
And the yield on that would be decent too if you were to rent that property out?
Absolutely. If we wanted to rent that out, yeah, it'd be a good yield. Particularly if you think about it, if you were to build your granny flat, you could potentially have 2 incomes coming out of that property, potentially, if we wanted to, we wanted to move out. So,
good retirement strategy for some too.
Not bad, not bad. Yeah. It was, and once again, like we did have to make that sacrifice. We could have had something shiny and brand new, and we could have raised our family in that. But I figured, and maybe this is greedy of me, Tuan, but I wouldn't want to settle with 200 squares of half a building, right? And that was my narrative to Natalie, to my dear wife. It was like, look, baby, if we could just hold this out a little bit longer, delayed gratification a little bit longer, maybe we can get something a little bit shinier, a little bit bigger, something that we'd love to raise our kids in.
So good.
Yeah, and and again, you know, it's that holding that image in your mind's eye that you're not going to settle for anything less.
Yeah, and if it's always in particular to that circumstance at that time, right? It doesn't have to be your forever home when you're going to buy yes, some people choose to live out that dream, the Australian dream is to own your own home. It doesn't have to be forever home.
That's right.
You know, things change, family, you know, sort of grows, and the needs of the family grows, and so as you do, you'll need to evolve your choice of how you live and where you live.
Yes.
But importantly, at that point in time, you want to be able to choose something that, yes, you know, rewards the family or takes care of the family, but has it's been able to lay some extra golden eggs.
Yes.
And thinking about that at that time is always valuable, because the place that you also live in, I'm not sure if you know, but is tax-free.
Yes.
So whenever you go to sell that property and upgrade your home, all that equity is yours without having to pay tax. And so that's really important to be able to manufacture that growth.
You want that property to perform the best.
Correct. Unless you decide to rent out the back of that house, which has its own tax implications because it becomes semi-investment.
Yes.
But it's something to think about that. And I guess the moral of it all is that what I'm hearing is there's a lot of delayed gratification in your life in being able to achieve your property portfolio over the years. And having that type of mindset to sort of like think about what's best for you. And some of those takeaways, I guess, for the listeners out there, the viewers out there, is how do you want to sum it up, Phil? What are your key takeaways that you feel?
Yeah, so then I love the direction that we're taking here, Twan, because I would say this, right? If one of the things that I've probably neglected to mention throughout the whole time that we'd been doing this was I was really just stacking up myself with options. Right? And so with a property portfolio like what we've been able to build this last few years, I mean, I could go back to rentvesting if I wanted. I could sell any number of the properties that I had to purchase. It could be a forever home that I want to purchase into, or I could buy a commercial property if I wanted to, right? Go back a number of years, I wouldn't have had any of these options. Yeah. So I suppose if we were going to put it together in terms of like, if we were going to boil it down to anything, I think for anyone who's considering how is this going to work, like, I mean, there's a solution for everyone out there, right? And the big thing is it is going to take change, right? And change can be scary and it can be daunting, but it could also be incredibly rewarding. And in hindsight, you would thank yourself that you raised up to that challenge, that you sort of, were able to drop old mindsets and pick up new ways of thinking, new challenges to I guess, open yourself up to what's possible.
Yeah, amazing. Well, thank you so much, Phil. Appreciate your time today.
Thanks for having me on board, Tuan.
Awesome.
Keen to do it again.
Legend.